Welcome everyone. If you are able to hear me and see me, just give me a thumbs up on the chat box so that I can start with the images then. Perfect. Right. So this is, this is the second part of my webinar. The first part, if you've missed out on that, is available on the Marrow FMG YouTube channel and on my personal YouTube channel, which is Rohan Khandelwal as well. So you can look at that video as well. The PDF, also the link for that PDF has also been shared below the video, so you can download the PDF for the first session also. In today's session, I'll be discussing again the important images. As I've highlighted in the previous session, images are extremely important for your exam. There were at least 20 odd image-based questions from surgery this year. Total number of questions from surgery in your FMG exam were around 35, and around 20 to 25 were image-based questions. If we are to follow the same trend and the clinical trend, clinical images will assume a lot of importance. Today, I'll be discussing the images of general surgery, trauma, burns, plastic surgery. So all the general surgery topics, images I'll be discussing today, these are extremely important, and at least 4 to 5 questions can be expected from these images, which I'm going to show you. As usual, we are going to share the PDF with you tomorrow via email. Those who cannot find the link, please search the spam folder tomorrow for the link of the PDF. Otherwise, when we post the video on YouTube, we'll share the link below that as well. Now, without wasting any time, let's start with the images. This is a favorite picture of mine, which I clicked a long time back at Ranthambore. So always good to start with this image. Now, the first image which I want to discuss in general surgery is the surgical safety checklist. I've covered this many times previously, the surgical safety checklist. And in the surgical safety checklist, you should know that there are 3 main key aspects of the surgical safety checklist. This is to improve patient safety. You have the sign in phase, you have the timeout phase, and you have the sign out phase. Right? These are the 3 phases which are there. And the important thing in each phase, sign in is before induction of anesthesia. And in the sign in phase, we confirm the identity of the patient. We check the site which is to be operated so that we don't operate on the wrong side. And we look for the consent. The consent, mind you, I hope you people are also making notes. Keep on making notes. Not everything is written on the slides. The consent is always a written consent. It is always a written consent, not a verbal consent. The second phase is before skin incision. This is the timeout phase before we start surgery. And the 2 key things from the FMG exam point of view, which you need to remember, that antibiotic prophylaxis is checked in this phase. Antibiotic prophylaxis is checked in this phase, and also the surgeon tells the entire team what surgery is he going to perform. The sign out phase is the final phase when the surgery is about to get over. And again, very important, the nurse counts the equipment and the gauze pieces to make sure that nothing has been left inside. So I've highlighted the 3 key phases of surgical safety checklist and the important points in each phase, which you need to know for the exam. This is a soaked mop. You have small gauze pieces, you have big mops. You should know that a completely soaked mop with blood is 100 ml of blood. Also, in modern theaters of today, these mops and gauze pieces are lined with a radiopaque line. There is a radiopaque line running across these gauze pieces, and that line is there because just in case somebody forgets the gauze piece, then you can easily find it on X-ray. Right? So if supposing by mistake it's been left inside the abdomen, you can do a C-arm X-ray or you can do an X-ray and you can find the gauze piece there. These are the zones of the theater. These have also been asked in the FMG exam, especially the protective zone where the changing rooms are present. So if you were to go into the theater, you first have to change your clothes, and the changing room is present in the protective zone. The transfer bay and the pre and the post-operative rooms are also in the protective zone. The clean zone is the one which connects the protective to the aseptic zone. Aseptic zone is the actual theater. And the clean zone has the equipment storage room and the maintenance workshop. Equipment store room has also been asked in the exam. So these are the two questions which have been asked from this slide. You should make a note of it. Is my voice clear or is it still breaking up? All those who can hear me clearly, can you just give me a thumbs up, please? Perfect. All right. Thank you. Extremely important slide. There is no FMG exam when IV lines are not asked, and all of you should be able to identify IV lines. Very, very, very important. So you should know that 14 gauge is orange, gray is 16, green is 18, pink is 20, blue is 22, yellow is 24. This might sound boring, but this is a very, very important question. Every year, this is asked, har saal pucha jata hai. Now, 14 gauge is the widest bore, whereas yellow or 24 is the narrowest bore. And jitta wide hoga, the wider it is, the easier or the faster the flow rate. You can easily give fluids through that. And the narrower the cannula, the slower the flow rate. You should know that the most common, there is no mnemonic, please. There's no mnemonic for this. This is easy to remember. It's a one-time effort. If you revise it, you can easily remember it. Please don't fall in the prey of mnemonics for these IV lines. You can easily remember it, okay? You should know that the most common complication of IV lines, superficial thrombophlebitis, is the most common complication of IV lines. You can see here that there is a cord-like swelling which develops starting from the IV line. This is superficial thrombophlebitis. The next thing, which is also commonly asked in the FMG exam, the various surgical positions. You all know about lithotomy position. Lithotomy position is commonly used for hemorrhoid surgery, for fissure surgery, for TURP. You know that TURP is transurethral resection of prostate. And you should know, this has also been asked in the exam, that common peroneal nerve injury is quite common if the legs are not supported properly. So if you don't support the legs properly, then that can give rise to common peroneal nerve injury. The lateral or the kidney position, this is used for thoracotomy procedures and also for renal procedures. Prone position is used for spinal surgery. This has also been asked in the exam. Prone position is used for spinal surgery. The supine position is the most common position where the patient is lying straight. That is the most common surgical position. For most of the abdominal procedures, supine position is done. You also have the jackknife position. This is the jackknife position where the patient is in the knee elbow position. And very important question which has been asked in the exam, that this is not used now. Jackknife position is not used because of positional asphyxia. So you should know that we no longer use jackknife position. This image or this position has also been asked. This is Fowler's or sitting position. This is best for CNS surgeries. For CNS surgeries, especially the posterior fossa surgeries. The drawback of this position is that there is increased risk of air embolism. The good thing about this position is better exposure, and it gives you a bloodless field. Better exposure, bloodless field, but the drawback is increased risk of air embolism. You should know that if the OT table, the head end and the foot end are at the same level, that is known as the neutral position of the OT table. If the head end and foot end are at the same level, that is the neutral position. If the head end is raised and the foot end is low, that is known as reverse Trendelenburg position. Head end raised, foot end low is reverse Trendelenburg position. And very importantly, this is used for lap cholecystectomy. This has been asked in the exam. Lap cholecystectomy, reverse Trendelenburg, and right side up is used. Trendelenburg position where the foot end is raised and the head end is low, is used for pelvic surgery. This is a combination of lithotomy and Trendelenburg position. This is known as Lloyd-Davies position, and this is mainly used for rectal cancer surgery, where we can do low anterior resection. LAR is low anterior resection, and APR is abdominoperineal resection. LAR is low anterior resection, APR is abdominoperineal resection. Another important thing is regarding surgical blades. And this question was asked last year in your FMG exam, that number 11 is the stab blade. Number 11, this pointed one, is the stab blade, and this is used for incision and drainage. To drain an abscess, we use a number 11 blade. Number 12 blade is curved from the front, and this is used for suture removals. The other blades, 10, 15, 20, 21, 22, 23, are all used for making incisions. So you should definitely know about number 11 and number 12 blades. These have been asked in the exam. Another instrument which you should know, this is a BP handle. This is a Bard-Parker handle. And this Bard-Parker handle, you put the blade here. So the blade is mounted on a Bard-Parker handle. You should be able to identify a Bard-Parker handle. Again, a super important question for your exam is regarding energy sources. And these two images have been asked multiple times in the FMG exam. You have a bipolar cautery and you have a monopolar cautery. You should be able to identify both the images. Bipolar cautery is like prongs, right? They're like prongs, chimte jaise lagte hain. Whereas monopolar cautery is like a pencil or a pen. So that's how you differentiate between the two. Monopolar cautery, the one which is like a pencil, has two buttons. You have a yellow and a blue button. Yellow is for cutting, blue is for coagulation. Bipolar cautery, there are two, it's like prongs, so there are two paddles here. It is safe to use close to vital nerves and end arteries. Extremely important question. Safe to use close to vital nerves and end arteries. So the surgeries which can be done using bipolar cautery are ear lobule surgery, penile surgery, thyroid and parotid surgery. Whenever we are using a monopolar cautery, we need to use a cautery pad. Some of you must have seen this cautery pad in the theater. Those who've seen this in the theater, give me a thumbs up on the chat box. So this is a cautery pad which we put on the thigh or the calf of the patient, and it should have a wide area of contact. Now, mind you, this is for monopolar cautery, not for bipolar. You don't need this. Also, if you use a small pad which is not fitting properly, that can give rise to burns at the site of the cautery pad. So good, a lot of you have seen this cautery pad. Now, like I told you, you can either have cutting or you can have coagulation. You should know that the cutting mode or the cutting current is a low voltage continuous current. Cutting current is a low voltage continuous current, whereas the coagulation mode, you have high voltage alternating current. You have high voltage alternating current in coagulation mode. This is another device which you should be able to identify. This is a harmonic scalpel, and the utility or the good thing about a harmonic scalpel is that you can cause coagulation without heat production. So coagulation can be done without heat production. You can coagulate vessels up to 7 millimeters in diameter. Vessels up to 7 millimeters in diameter can be coagulated, and this has an oscillatory blade. This oscillates between 20,000 to 50,000 hertz. And this oscillatory blade causes coagulation without heat production. The advantage is because heat is not being produced. That is why this can be used close to vital structures, close to vital nerves. Because heat will not be generated, and it will not damage those structures. Images of knots have been asked in the NEET exam and the DNB exam. They can be asked in your exam as well. This one is a square knot. I'll again elaborate on a square knot. A square knot is a secure knot which does not open up. This is a surgeon's knot. So I want you to appreciate the difference between square versus surgeon. In square, you have a single throw, one throw, and you have one throw. That is a square knot, 1 and 1. Surgeon's knot, you have 2 throws followed by 1 throw. Those who've done skin suturing, you people must have rotated your thread 2 times around the needle holder first time around and then a single time. So if you rotate it 2 times, then followed by 1 time, you are actually taking a surgeon's knot, which is also a secure knot. So I hope if this difference between square and surgeons is clear, just give me a thumbs up in the chat box, please. If you are able to differentiate between the two knots which I've just told you, give me a thumbs up in the chat box. Perfect. Good. Right. Now, this was another question which was asked in the exam to differentiate a square from a granny's knot. A square knot is a secure knot. Okay, square knot is a secure knot, and I want you to observe here that both the threads are coming above the loop here, whereas both the threads are going below the loop here. In square, both the threads above, both the threads below the loop. Whereas grannies, one is going above, one is going below. Again, one is going above, one is going below. So granny's knot is also known as a slip knot, and it is an insecure knot. It is an insecure knot. It can open up easily. Again, square knot, I told you, some people have asked me to repeat it. Square knot, one throw, you cross once and you cross once more. So 1 and 1. Whereas a surgeon's, you cross 2 times. Here I'm crossing 2 times and then I'm crossing 1 time. So 2 followed by 1 is surgeon's, 1 followed by 1 is square knot. Now you know that for skin suturing, we want everted edges. We want everted edges. So to get everted edges, we can use a simple suture. But if a simple suture is not giving rise to everted edges, we will use mattress sutures. Mattress sutures are of 2 types. You have vertical mattress and you have horizontal mattress. They both help in eversion of the skin edge. I am repeating again, they both help in eversion of the skin edge, which is what we want in skin suturing. Also, both these are hemostatic in nature. They also are hemostatic in nature. This is a very important image. This is subcuticular suturing. Subcuticular suturing is when the sutures are taken from inside and there is no mark on the surface of the skin. There is no mark on the surface of the skin. So when there is no mark on the surface of the skin, will this be cosmetically better or cosmetically poor? Answer in the chat box, please. If there is no mark on the skin, will this be cosmetically better or cosmetically poor? Cosmetically better. Excellent. This is cosmetically better. So this is a cosmetic suturing technique. And the question which has been asked in your exam, that 3-0 monocryl, that is the suture material used for subcuticular suturing. 3-0 monocryl. Another important image from Bailey is that this is regarding skin suturing. If the depth of the wound is X centimeters, if the depth of the wound is X centimeters, then the distance between 2 sutures should be 2x. Distance between 2 sutures is 2 times the depth. Whereas the bite on each side we take a bite of X, but the distance between 2 sutures is 2x. So this is another image from Bailey which you should know about. This has also been asked in the FMG exam. A needle has 3 parts. You have the pointed end, you have the body, and you have the swaged end. It is not swag, it is swaged. This is what was asked in the exam, swaged end. The swaged end is where the thread is attached. Where the thread is attached, that is the swaged end. And you can have two types of needles. You can have a cutting and you can have a round body needle. Cutting needle has a triangular cross section and it is used for tough structures like the skin and the sheath. Whereas the round body needles are used for delicate structures like CBD, that is common bile duct, bowel, and blood vessels and bladder. Another question, where do we hold the needle? You can see it is held 1/3 from the swaged end and 2/3 from the pointed end. 1/3 from the swaged end, 2/3 from the pointed end. Although the colors of sutures have not been asked, I'm just showing them to you and also highlighting some key points regarding those sutures in the image. So catgut is almost brownish in color and it is made from sheep gut, especially the submucosa of sheep gut. These two questions have been asked in the exam. Catgut is not made from the gut of a cat. It is made from the gut of sheep, that too the submucosa. Monocryl, I've already told you, is the best suture for subcuticular suturing. Subcuticular suturing, I've already explained to you. Vicryl is polyglactin. Vicryl is also absorbable and Vicryl dissolves in 60 to 90 days. It's purple or violet in color. Vicryl is purple or violet in color, dissolves in 60 to 90 days, and it can be used for bowel, bladder, and common bile duct. Proline is extremely important from the exam. The uses of proline have been asked multiple times in the exam. Proline is a non-absorbable suture and it can be used for vascular anastomosis, mesh for hernia repair, and rectus sheath closure. These are the uses of proline, which you should remember for the exam. Vascular anastomosis, mesh for hernia repair, and rectus sheath closure. Proline is blue in color. Right? It's like this blue. This was a picture which I clicked in Jaipur. Same blue color. This is the color for proline. Now, another question which you should know for the exam, this has also been asked in your exam, suture removal for non-absorbable sutures from various sites. Specifically, the most important which you should remember, sutures over the face can be removed as early as 3 days. Sutures over the face can be removed as early as 3 days. For Whipple's procedure, yes, so when we are doing a pancreatico-jejunal anastomosis, proline can be used. You are correct, pancreatico-jejunal anastomosis, proline, fine proline sutures can be used. I have already told you that you all will get the PDF tomorrow on your email. If you can't see it in the email in your inbox, search the spam folder by tomorrow evening. Otherwise, when I post this video, I will also share the link for the PDF. So don't worry, you will get all the slides. But pay attention and note down the extra points because each and everything will not be written on the slides. Again, these two have been asked in your exam, circular stapler and linear stapler. Circular stapler, you should be able to identify these two images. Circular stapler is used for hemorrhoid surgery and for low anterior resection for rectal cancer or sigmoid cancer surgery. Whereas a linear stapler is used for sleeve gastrectomy, which is a bariatric surgery procedure, and for Zenker's diverticulum as well for diverticulectomy. Again, very important staplers. Now, the causes of postoperative fever in FMG, you can get clinical scenarios from this. On the first postoperative day, the most common cause is atelectasis. Atelectasis is collapse of the alveoli. And to correct the collapse of the alveoli, we use an incentive spirometer. This image was asked in your exam. Very important. How many of you have seen an incentive spirometer in the ward and the patient lifting these balls up? So incentive spirometer is used for chest physiotherapy, and this can prevent atelectasis. Good. A lot of you have seen it. I'm happy about that. Good. Post-operative day 2 or 3, the most common cause of hospital-acquired infection is urinary tract infection. You can develop pneumonia, superficial thrombophlebitis, the image I've already shown to you. Day 4, day 5, patient can develop SSI. SSI is surgical site infection. The definition of surgical site infection has also been asked. It is wound infection which develops within 30 days of surgery. It is wound infection which develops within 30 days of surgery, or if an implant is used, 1 year of surgery. So you should know the definition of surgical site infection as well. DVT is deep venous thrombosis, and to prevent DVT, we can use pneumatic anti-DVT stockings. The image of pneumatic anti-DVT stockings has also been asked multiple times. These stockings are connected to a pump, and this pump pushes in air. The stocking inflates and it prevents stasis of blood. It prevents stasis of blood. POD means post-operative day. Ranjita is asking, what is POD? POD means post-operative day. After surgery, which day? That will be post-operative day. This one is an anti-shock garment. This is anti-shock garment. Anti-shock garment is used in patients with hypovolemic shock. It is used in patients with hypovolemic shock, those who are bleeding. Supposing in the battlefield, there is a patient who's bleeding, you can use an anti-shock garment that is going to push blood from the lower limbs to the heart, and that helps in maintaining the cardiac output and the systolic blood pressure. Helps in maintaining the cardiac output and the systolic blood pressure. This is a pigtail catheter. I've already written here. Pigtail catheters are used to drain intra-abdominal collections. Pigtail catheters are used to drain intra-abdominal collections. Karan is absolutely right. He's saying low molecular weight heparin is better for prevention, or the mechanical technique. Low molecular weight heparin is much, much better than the mechanical technique. Low molecular weight heparin is much better than the mechanical technique. This is burst abdomen. Burst abdomen is when the rectus sheath wound opens up. That is burst abdomen, when the rectus sheath wound opens up. And this occurs around day 6. And you get a salmon fluid sign. Salmon fluid sign is when pinkish fluid comes out of the wound. That is a sign of burst abdomen. When a burst abdomen develops, the emergency management is urobag laparostomy. This is the emergency management. The rectus sheath which is opened up, we will put a urobag on top of that and we'll cover up the wound. That is known as urobag laparostomy. That is the emergency management. Yes, pigtail can be used for pleural drainage as well. Pigtail can be used for pleural drainage as well. So urobag laparostomy is the temporary or the emergency management for a patient with burst abdomen. You should know the names of 2 scores, asepsis wound score. You don't need to know the details for the FMG exam. You should know the asepsis wound score is used for wound infections or SSI. This is the asepsis wound score. And this one is the Southampton wound score. This one is the Southampton wound score. These are the 2 scores which are used for wound infections, Southampton and the asepsis score. Very important in the age of corona. This is very important. VAC can also be used, correct? I'll tell you about VAC as well. But more importantly for your exam, please remember this, the 5 moments of hand hygiene. The 5 moments of hand hygiene when you should use a sanitizer. So you should use a sanitizer before touching the patient, after touching the patient, if you touch the patient's surroundings, if you're exposed to the body fluids of the patients, and before carrying out any procedure. These are the 5 moments of hand hygiene where a sanitizer, alcohol-based sanitizer should be used. But an important question, the places where soap and water are to be used, once you visited the toilet, sanitizer alone is not enough. You should wash your hands with soap and water. And if the hands are visibly soiled. This question was asked in one of the recent exams. You should know the 5 moments of hand hygiene. They are extremely important for the exam. These are the various steps of hand washing. The steps are highlighted in the image. You will get the PDF. These steps have not been asked, the details have not been asked in the FMG exam, but they've been asked in another exam. There's no harm in knowing the steps of hand washing. And the question which you should know, that hand washing is the most important, hand washing is the most important factor to reduce wound infection. Hand hygiene or hand washing is the most important factor to reduce wound infection. These are the 3 sites where even if you wash your hands, contamination can be missed behind. Even if you wash your hands properly, contamination can be missed. That is the thumb, interdigital area, and the tips. Thumb, interdigital area, and the tips, these are the places where contamination can still be missed. This one is known as a bear hugger, and this bear hugger blows hot air over the patient. This is to prevent hypothermia during surgery. If there is hypothermia, there can be a lot of complications, including increased wound infections, and a bear hugger is used to prevent hypothermia during surgery. Extremely important for the exam is a Ryle's tube. It's as important as an IV line. A lot of questions over the last 2 or 3 years have been asked regarding Ryle's tube. Ryle's tube or nasogastric tubes, you should be able to identify them. The best position to put in a Ryle's tube is the sitting position with the neck slightly flexed. Sitting position with the neck slightly flexed. You should know that the length of the Ryle's tube, how to measure the length of the Ryle's tube from the nose to the ear and ear to the xiphisternum. Nose to the ear and ear to the xiphisternum. That is the best position, or that is the best way to measure the length of the Ryle's tube, which is to be inserted. I'm sure a lot of you must have seen Ryle's tube being inserted. You should know all the potential questions pertaining to Ryle's tube. I've just told you some of the important questions. This one is a PICC line, peripherally inserted central catheter. Peripherally inserted central catheter, that means you will insert it like an IV line, but the tip is lying in a central vein. Tip is lying in a central vein. This is a PICC line. PICC line can be used to deliver nutrition. PICC lines can be used for chemotherapy. PICC lines can also be used to deliver antibiotics for a long time. This one is a central vein. You can see this is a central line or a central venous insertion. And central line, the question which was asked last year in the FMG exam, the most commonly used vein is the internal jugular vein. The most commonly used vein is the internal jugular vein. The highest risk of pneumothorax is when you insert it in the subclavian vein, and the least risk of infection is also with subclavian. Please remember, questions from central lines are extremely important. You should know about a central line and these simple questions which I've told you. This milkish fluid, which you must have seen, has anyone seen this TPN solution? A bag of milkish fluid which is going into the IV line of a surgical patient or in the ICU. Has anyone seen this? This is total parenteral nutrition, TPN, and 1 to 2 liters is given in 1 day. I'm glad that a lot of you have seen this. Good. Another very important question which was asked last year in the exam and in various other exams, this has been asked multiple times, is QSOFA. QSOFA is Quick Sequential Organ Failure Assessment Score. Quick Sequential Organ Failure Assessment Score is QSOFA, and this includes 3 parameters: hypotension less than 100, altered mental status, and tachypnea more than 22. Hypotension less than 100, altered mental status, and tachypnea more than 22. And if you have a score of 2 or more than 2, then that indicates sepsis, and that indicates a poor outcome. Indicates sepsis and indicates a poor outcome. Sepsis 3.0 guidelines, you should know the important points. Sepsis is defined as a life-threatening organ dysfunction caused by dysregulated host response to infection. That is the definition of sepsis. Septic shock is when the BP is not increasing just with fluids and you need vasopressors as well. QSOFA does not include the heart rate. Heart rate is not there in QSOFA. It is for SIRS, you have the pulse rate more than 90, not for QSOFA. How does QSOFA work? QSOFA is just a score. So if the patient is meeting these criteria and there is a known foci of infection, you will call it sepsis then. So before I move on to the images for trauma, I hope all of you are solving MCQs regularly. In my previous sessions also, I've told you that you should be solving at least 50 to 60 MCQs on a daily basis these days. Marrow already has made a Q bank for some subjects, specifically for FMG. You can access it through your Marrow plans if you have them. Otherwise, there are a lot of free question modules available as well in the Q bank, which you can appear for. Practice clinical questions. Make sure that you've done last 3 years FMG questions and last 3 years NEET exam questions. My request also is to solve UPSC questions. You can find them on my YouTube channel as well, because a lot of UPSC based topics are asked directly in your FMG exam also. Now, talking about trauma, you should know about the trimodal distribution of mortality. Trimodal distribution means there are 3 spikes. First spike of death occurs at impact, and this is mainly due to severe head injury. Unfortunately, we cannot save these patients. You people must have heard that there were a group of 17 gynecologists who were going to Goa last month. Their bus met with an accident and all of them unfortunately passed away. Most of them passed away due to head injuries, and severe head injuries, it is very difficult to save patients. Within the first hour, the causes of death are airway obstruction, tracheobronchial injury, pneumothorax, circulatory arrest, hemothorax, and tamponade. And if the patient can be brought to the hospital within the first hour, we can prevent mortality. And that is why the first hour following trauma is the golden hour following trauma. The first hour following trauma is the golden hour following trauma. This question has also been asked in the exam. Can you tell me what is the golden period for a wound? There are 2 separate questions. What is the golden hour is the first hour following trauma. But can you tell me what is the golden period for a wound? Can you answer that in the chat box, please? 6 hours. Excellent. 6 hours is the correct answer. Very good. 6 hours is the correct answer. The third spike of mortality is due to delayed head injury and sepsis. You should know that cervical spine is very important. Cervical spine management is very important in a trauma patient, and we follow the nexus criteria for the cervical spine. We follow the nexus criteria. The nexus criteria, the mnemonic for the nexus criteria, N is for neurological deficit, E is for alcohol intoxication, X is for extreme distracting neck injuries, U is unable to provide history or unable to speak, and S is spinal tenderness. This you need to remember. If any is present, if any sign is present, we will image the cervical spine. Even if you have a single of these signs present, you have to image the cervical spine, and that is important for the exam. This one is a video laryngoscope. Video laryngoscopes are used for intubation. You know, intubation is mainly done through the orotracheal route, and this is a video laryngoscope which can facilitate intubation in trauma patients. Supposing you cannot intubate a patient, supposing we cannot intubate, then we need to make an emergency airway. And this emergency airway has been asked multiple times in the exam. The emergency airway which we use is needle cricothyroidotomy. This has been asked many, many times in the FMG exam. This is if you cannot put in an endotracheal tube, this is how we will get an emergency airway. The definitive management, if you cannot put in a tube, the definitive management is to put in a tracheostomy, right? Is to make a tracheostomy. First, we do a needle cricothyroidotomy, then tracheostomy is the definitive management if a tube cannot be inserted. All trauma patients, you should put in wide bore IV lines. But if you cannot put in an IV line, supposing it's not possible for you to put in an IV line, then you can even do intraosseous infusion. You should be able to identify this image. Intraosseous infusion, you puncture the bone just below the tibial tuberosity, and you can give fluids, you can give blood, you can give drugs. This is also one of the emergency managements if you cannot put in an IV line. Somebody just asked about fluids to be given. There is an update. You should give 1 liter of crystalloid in a trauma patient initially instead of 2 liters. So crystalloids are given initially and 1 liter is given instead of 2 liters initially. This is another update which you should know. So somebody is asking what to do if the patient's mouth is full of secretions and fluids. What to do first? You first suction it out and then try to intubate. You suction it out and then try to intubate. If crystalloids don't work, you can even use colloids and blood products. But again, a question which has been asked in the exam is a log roll. Log roll is a technique done to examine the back of a trauma patient. It is a technique done to examine the back of a trauma patient. And the question which has been asked, minimum 4 people are used to carry out an effective log roll. Super important for your exam is Glasgow Coma Score. And there are certain changes which have occurred in the Glasgow Coma Score. All of you should be able to memorize the Glasgow Coma Score and questions based on it first. If the patient has osteomyelitis, of course, you're not going to do intraosseous infusion. That's a ridiculous question. And if there is a limb defect, yes, 5 people are required. First crystalloids, then colloids. You don't use colloids first. You don't give blood products straight away. First, give crystalloids. Now, coming to the Glasgow Coma Score, all of you should know about the Glasgow Coma Score. The motor response, 1 is none, 2 is extension, 3 is abnormal flexion, 4 is when the patient withdraws away from pain, 5 is when the patient localizes pain, and 6 is when the patient is obeying commands. Always remember, follow or record the highest possible motor response. Please write this line down. Always record the highest motor response. This question has been asked in clinical scenarios. Verbal response, 5 is when the patient is oriented, 4 is when the patient is confused, 3 is when the patient is using inappropriate words, 2 is when the patient is making incomprehensible sounds, and 1 is when the patient is not speaking at all. Eye-opening, 4 is spontaneous, 3 is to speech, 2 is to pressure, and 1 is when there's no eye-opening. One update is the GCS P score. B score is the pupil reactivity score, that is the P score, and it is to be subtracted from GCS. So this is one update. If both the pupils, look here please, if both the pupils are unreactive to light, then you will subtract 2 from the GCS. If one pupil is unreactive to light, you will subtract 1. If neither pupil is unreactive, subtract 0. This is an important update for your exam. Somebody has also asked me, how do we calculate the GCS score for an intubated patient? So earlier, intubated patient, it was written as VT and VT was given a score of 1. Earlier intubated patients, it was written as VT and it was given a score of 1. But now we write it as VNT. NT is non-testable. Now we write it as NT or non-testable. That's correct. Excellent. VT is not 0. VT initially was given a score of 1. Now we write it as NT or non-testable. So if you have a patient with blunt trauma abdomen, if the patient is hemodynamically stable, the first investigation always is fast, but in a stable patient, the investigation of choice is CECT, that is contrast enhanced CT scan. For an unstable patient, the investigation of choice in both the situations is fast. What is fast? It has been asked many, many times in your exam. Fast is focused assessment sonogram in trauma. You should know the full form: focused assessment sonogram in trauma. And in FAST, the probe is kept at 4 places. First is the epigastrium, second is the right hypochondrium, third is the left hypochondrium, fourth is the hypogastrium. You should know the order in which the probe is kept in FAST. You should know the full form of FAST as well. It is important. Another update is eFAST. eFAST is extended fast. That is, you keep it in 4 places, plus you assess the thoracic cavity. So in total, the probe is kept at 6 places. In total, the probe is kept at 6 places. So somebody is asking if veins are collapsed and you cannot, and you have a patient with osteomyelitis, if the veins are collapsed, you will put in a central line and you give fluids through the central line, and you can even give antibiotics through that central line. Shubham, of course, for probe placement in eFAST, first you place the 4 probes here, then you do the thoracic cavity. The 2 additional places for eFAST are the thoracic cavity, right and left thoracic cavity. So once you assess the thorax, that becomes eFAST or extended fast. These are the grades of splenic trauma. You need to know the grades of splenic trauma. This you need to. Which are the 2 thoracic positions. Thorax, you keep it to look for the pleural space. There is no fixed position. You will keep it along the chest wall to assess the pleura on both the sides. That becomes eFAST. There's no fixed position where you keep it. So you should know the grades of splenic trauma. These are important for the exam. I only want you to remember the grades of splenic trauma, not the other organs. This is the management of splenic trauma. If you have a grade 1, grade 2 injury, the patient is usually stable. The investigation of choice is CECT, and these patients are managed conservatively. Conservative management doesn't mean you dump them on the bed and forget about them. You have to monitor the vitals, monitor the hematocrit. If the grade of injury is increasing, you can angioembolize the patient. If that fails, you need to carry out surgery. But if you're doing surgery for a grade 1, grade 2 injury, we do splenic preservation surgery. For grade 4, grade 5, we will do splenectomy. We remove the entire spleen. There was a question from zones of retroperitoneal trauma in last year's FMG exam. In the last FMG exam, you should know about this. Zone 1 includes the major vessels, and we should explore all penetrating injuries to zone 1. All penetrating injuries to zone 1 should be explored, and zone 1 has maximum mortality, Zone 2 includes the kidney and the ureter and the renal vessels. You should explore patients who have a vascular injury or those who are unstable. Zone 3 is the most commonly injured zone, the pelvic area. Majority patients can be managed conservatively here. You should know these zones. This was asked in the last FMG exam. Flail chest is important. The definition of flail chest is fracture of 2 or more consecutive ribs at 2 or more places. That is the definition of flail chest. And in these two images which has been shown, patient A has a flail chest. Patient A is the one who has a flail chest. B does not have a flail chest because there are 2 or more than 2 fractures at 2 or more than 2 consecutive ribs in patient A. The initial management is pain control and oxygen. And if the respiratory rate is more than 20 or the PO2 is less than 60, then IPPV is done. Can you write the full form of IPPV? It has been asked in your exam. Can you write down the full form of IPPV in the chat box, please? This is a very important X-ray. Correct. Intermittent positive pressure ventilation. Excellent, guys. Intermittent positive pressure ventilation. Very good. This is tension pneumothorax. You can see here that there is a blackout here. There is pneumothorax here. In patients are going to have tachypnea, hypotension, and raised JVP. And there will be a hyper-resonant percussion note on the side of pneumothorax. This you should know. Hyper-resonant percussion note. Very important update. This has been asked multiple times. In EFAST, there are 3 signs for tension pneumothorax. Seashore, barcode, and stratosphere. Seashore, barcode, and stratosphere signs. So you should know about these signs. And you should also know that now the needle, the emergency management is needle decompression for tension pneumothorax. And the update is very important. The update is now the needle is inserted in the 5th intercostal space, just anterior to the mid-axillary line. In the 5th intercostal space, just anterior to the mid-axillary line. That is where we insert the needle now. Earlier, it was inserted in the 2nd intercostal space in the mid-clavicular line, but now it has changed. This is the triangle of safety where a chest tube is inserted. You should be able to identify this triangle. This is bounded by the lateral edge of the pectoralis major, the lateral edge of latissimus dorsi. Apex is in the axilla, and the base is formed by the 5th intercostal space. Yes, in children, it is still the 2nd intercostal space. You're right. In children, it is still the 2nd intercostal space. It's in adults that it is changed. Very important question. This was asked in one of the recent exams, and you should be able to identify these 2 instruments. I even covered this in the first webinar. You know, a Eurobag is to collect urine when you connect it with the Foley's. All the measurements are present here. This one, the other one which I've labeled, is an underwater seal. The underwater seal is connected to a chest tube. And this is a special bag which is connected to the chest tube. What is so special about this underwater seal bag? You have the tube running right down till the bottom, and the lower end of the tube is submerged underwater. The lower end of the tube is submerged underwater, and the reason why we are submerging it underwater is so that air bubbles can bubble out. Air can bubble out, but air will not be sucked inside again. Right, so that air bubbles can come out, they will not be sucked inside again. That is why we call it an underwater seal. Please, yes, if bubbles are coming out, that means the chest tube is in the right position. If you can differentiate between these 2 images, if the difference is clear to you, please give me a thumbs up in the chat box. This is an important question for your exam. Perfect, guys. Right, this is cardiac tamponade. Cardiac tamponade is rapid accumulation of blood in the pericardial space, and you classically get a Beck's triad asked more than 10 times in the FMG exam. Beck's triad is hypotension, raised JVP, and muffled heart sounds. Hypotension, raised JVP, and muffled heart sounds. And the emergency management is needle pericardiocentesis. This is hydropneumothorax as compared to the previous image which I showed to you of pneumothorax. This was the image of pneumothorax where only black was there, pneumothorax was there, but here you have an air fluid level as well. So this is hydropneumothorax. If it is a hemothorax, if it is because of blood, then we put in a chest tube. So the management of hemothorax is you put in a chest tube. Diaphragmatic injuries are more common on the left side as compared to the right side. Diaphragmatic injuries are more common on the left side as compared to the right side. These are the trauma neck zones. The trauma neck zones have also been asked in the exam. You want to understand tension pneumothorax again? Okay. So cardiac tamponade, you will get hypotension, raised JVP, and muffled heart sounds. In tension pneumothorax also you have hypotension, raised JVP. To differentiate tension pneumothorax from cardiac tamponade, we will see hyper resonant percussion note because यहाँ पे air है, there is air here, so you will get a hyper resonant percussion note here. Whereas in cardiac tamponade, you will see muffled heart sounds. The emergency management of tension pneumothorax is needle insertion and then a chest tube. For cardiac tamponade, it is needle pericardiocentesis followed by thoracotomy. I hope the difference is clear between the two. Every year, one is asked in the exam. The reason why left-sided diaphragmatic injuries are more common, can anyone tell me the reason? I'll be very happy if few people can tell me the reason. The reason is because the right side is protected by the liver. Excellent, correct. Right side is protected by the liver. That is why left-sided diaphragmatic injuries are more common. Very good. These are the three trauma neck zones. Zone 1 is from the thoracic inlet to the cricoid cartilage. Zone 2 is from cricoid to angle of mandible. And zone 3 is from angle of mandible to base of skull. The questions which I want you to remember, zone 2 is the most commonly injured zone. Zone 2 is the most commonly injured zone and the most surgically accessible zone as well. Zone 2, most commonly injured and most surgically accessible. Zone 1 is associated with maximum mortality. The definitive management for cardiac tamponade, initial management is needle pericardiocentesis. The definitive management is that you do a thoracotomy. You repair the tear and you put in a pericardial drain. Do a thoracotomy, repair the tear, put in a pericardial drain. Again, extremely important for the exam, extradural hemorrhage, subdural hemorrhage, you should be able to identify the CT scans. You should also know that NCCT, non-contrast CT scan, is the investigation of choice. Non-contrast CT scan is the investigation of choice in patients with head trauma. Extradural hemorrhage is seen in young patients following a high velocity impact, usually arterial in nature due to middle meningeal artery. This has also been asked, middle meningeal artery. You can get a lucid interval here, that is a period of normal consciousness between 2 episodes of unconsciousness. You will get a biconvex hemorrhage, which is a lens-shaped hemorrhage between the skull and the dura, and the management is to create a burr hole. Subdural hemorrhage, chronic subdural hemorrhage. So classically, you see chronic subdural hemorrhage. Chronic subdural hemorrhage is seen in elderly patients following a trivial trauma. Patient is going to come with altered sensorium after a few days. This is venous in nature due to the bridging veins, and you get a concavo-convex hemorrhage here or a crescenteric hemorrhage here. You should also know about diffuse axonal injury. Diffuse axonal injury is the most severe type of primary brain injury. This occurs due to a shearing force between the gray and the white matter. and the patient will be in a state of coma, but NCCT is normal. So the classical words which you would want to read in the question would be that patient is in coma, CT is normal, and GCS is not improving. Patient in coma, GCS not improving, CT is normal. Telltale signs of diffuse axonal injury. The investigation of choice is MRI. Please remember, every year in your exam, one head injury scenario and either tension pneumothorax or cardiac tamponade are asked. So in the last 7 or 8 slides which I've shown you, minimum 2 questions are asked in your exam. Nobody should make a mistake in these points. This is the Glasgow outcome score, not the Glasgow coma. This is the Glasgow outcome score, which is a prognostic score. I want you to remember, 1 is death, 2 is a persistent vegetative state, 2 is a persistent vegetative state. Right, let me just see if you people have any questions before I continue any further. Sure, you want me to discuss SDH again? Subdural chronic subdural hemorrhage can be seen in elderly patients following trivial trauma. EDH was being seen in young patients. EDH was being seen in young patients and high velocity impact. Subdural hematoma can occur even after a trivial trauma, right? And you can get altered sensorium after a few days to weeks. It is venous in nature. You get a concavo-convex hemorrhage. Concavo-convex, and you have to drain it out. Diffuse axonal injury, patient is in a state of coma. GCS does not improve, but the CT is absolutely normal. These will be the key words which you need to look at. Rahul, we don't do DPL if FAST is available. Diagnostic peritoneal lavage is not done. Okay. FAST is available. Diagnostic peritoneal lavage is not done. We are preparing mock tests for FMG like we did last time. Those mock tests will be made available to you before your exam. Okay, which will have clinical questions and image-based questions also. You all should know that the rule of 9 is the Wallace rule of 9. You should know palm is 1% body surface area. This is the Wallace rule of 9. You will get it in the PDF. You need to memorize the various percentages. You can be asked questions based on this. You also need to know that Lund and Browder charts are the best method to calculate body surface area burned. The Lund and Browder charts are the best method to calculate body surface area burned. This question has also been asked in your exam. Another update which I want you to know. Okay, so the extent of brain damage is more in SDH as compared to EDH. And I have already shared the important topics have already been sent to you. I can request the team to send you the list of important topics for all the subjects. And mind you, this is for FMGE. Once we send out the email tomorrow for PDFs, we will send you the list of important topics for other subjects, including surgery. You don't need to memorize the Lund and Browder charts. You don't need to memorize it. We will post the video. We will share the PDF. So let me ask relevant questions so that I can answer them. I've already told you, I'll share the video on YouTube. We will share the PDF also. Okay. So the Parkland's formula is the formula for resuscitation of burns patients. It is based on Ringer lactate, and it is 4 into body weight into total body surface area, and you get the amount of fluid required in 24 hours. Half of this fluid is to be given in the first 8 hours, and the other half is to be given in the next 16 hours. Okay, the other half is to be given in the next 16 hours. The update is the new ATLS formula. The new ATLS formula for adults, it is 2 into body weight into total body surface area. For children, it is 3 into body weight into total body surface area. So if you're asked further questions in the exam, please answer them based on the new formula until unless they specify that they want you to answer according to the Parkland's formula. Again, a very important question. This was asked in your exam as well. You should know the types of burns, the severity of burns you should be able to identify based on the image. If you see a blister, this is a telltale sign of a second degree superficial burn. A blister is a telltale sign of second degree superficial burn, and you should be able to identify that. If you get an image like this where there is black charred appearance and you can see the underlying tendon or the muscle, this is a grade 3, grade 4 burn, and grade 3, grade 4 burns are absolutely painless. Grade 3, grade 4 burns are absolutely painless, and you need to do skin grafting. The choice of fluid for burns patients is ringer lactate. First degree burns involve only the epidermis. They're red, tender, they blanch completely. One of the examples is a sunburn. They heal without scarring in 3 to 5 days. Second degree superficial burns involve the epidermis plus the papillary dermis. Blister formation is the classical finding here, which you should know about. It heals quickly without scarring. Deep burns involve the entire epidermis plus dermis. They are red, less tender. The entire area does not blanch, and they tend to form hypertrophic scars and keloids. I've already told you about third and fourth degree burns. Again, a very important question asked in the FMG exam. Very important question asked in the FMG exam is autograft, isograft, allograft, and xenograft. Autograft is when you take the graft from the same person, like a skin graft. Isograft is when you take it between identical twins. Allograft is the same species, and xenograft is different species. You should know these definitions. This image of a Humvee's knife has been asked in all possible exams multiple times. All of you should know that a Humvee's knife is used for raising a split thickness skin graft. It is used for raising a split thickness skin graft. You should be able to identify a Humvee's knife. Whenever we raise a split thickness skin graft, this is a split thickness skin graft which has epidermis plus part of dermis. The most common donor site for this is the thigh. And whenever we raise a split thickness skin graft, we make cuts in that graft so as to increase the surface area. This is known as meshing of the graft. This is known as meshing of the graft. Okay, why deep burns don't blanch? That's a good question. So superficial burns will blanch, deep don't, because the vessels get thrombosed. And if the vessels get thrombosed, even when you press it, there won't be blanching. That is known as fixed capillary staining. So deep burns where the vessels are thrombosed, that is known as, it'll give rise to fixed capillary staining. These are examples of some flaps. I will tell you what all questions you need to know. These are random flaps which are not based on any named vessel. VY-plasty. You have Z-plasty. Z-plasty is used to elongate wounds. It is used for post-burn contractures. And the ideal angle is 60 degrees, which leads to maximum elongation of 1.75 times. It is used for post-burn contractures. Post-burn contractures. A question which has been asked many times in the exam. This is a rhomboid flap, which is used for pilonidal sinus surgery. Rhomboid flap, which is used for pilonidal sinus surgery. Pilonidal sinus is also known as Jeep driver's disease. This question has been asked in the exam. Pilonidal sinus is Jeep driver's disease. These are axial flaps used for head and neck reconstruction, and you should know PMMC. PMMC has been asked multiple times in your exam. PMMC is pectoralis major myocutaneous flap. Pectoralis major myocutaneous flap. And this is the most commonly used flap by a head and neck surgeon. This question has been asked, most commonly used flap by a head and neck surgeon. This is Abbe-Slander flap used for lip and angle of mouth reconstruction. Used for lip and angle of mouth reconstruction. This was a breast cancer patient of mine where we did a latissimus dorsi flap for breast reconstruction. You should know some of the basic images for these flaps. Latissimus dorsi flap, you should be able to identify. It is used for breast reconstruction. Another patient of mine where we did breast reconstruction, these two questions have been asked multiple times. The most commonly used flap for breast reconstruction is the tram flap, whereas the best flap for breast reconstruction is the DIEP flap. This one was a DIEP flap which we did for this 31-year-old lady. Somebody has asked what is the difference between a flap and a graft. Good question. Graft is a piece of tissue which does not have its own blood supply. Graft does not have its own blood supply, whereas a flap has its own blood supply. That is the difference. Graft does not have its own blood supply, whereas a flap has its own blood supply. Another one which you should know is a free fibular flap. Free fibular flap is the best flap for mandibular reconstruction. Free fibular flap is the best flap for mandibular reconstruction. Very important topic for your exam is a bed sore. This question was asked in your recent exam. This is a grade 4 bed sore because you can see the muscle. This one is a grade 4 bed sore. You should know the most common site for bed sores. The most common site for bed sores is the ischium. Ischium is the most common site for bed sores, which you should know about. Ischium is the most common site for bed sores, followed by the ischium is the most common site, followed by the greater trochanter, then the sacrum. You should know that the staging of bed sores is the same as burns, which I've already explained to you. And for bed sores, frequent change of position is required, and you should change the position once every 2 hours. It is, Tricia is asking, random flap is not based on any blood vessel. Still, the flap has its own blood supply. Tricia, you didn't listen carefully. I said it is not based on any named blood vessel. So it does have its own blood supply, but it is not based on a named blood vessel. Okay. So you should be able to identify the grades of bed sores. If you can see the muscle, if you can see the bone, it's a grade 4 bed sore. Again, very important for your exam is a VAC dressing or negative pressure dressing. VAC or negative pressure dressing, minus 120 millimeters of mercury pressure is used. Minus 120 millimeters of mercury pressure is used. And I've listed the utility of VAC dressing here. It is used for chronic non-healing wounds, but make sure that you debride the wound before you put a VAC dressing. This is a Tegaderm, which is a transparent waterproof dressing, transparent film dressing or Tegaderm. It is a waterproof dressing. VAC dressing is super important. I've enlisted the causes. When you get the PDF, please memorize the utility of VAC dressing. Again, a question asked in your exam. You can answer in the chat box. Patient develops a lesion 6 months after surgery. Please identify the lesion. Correct. It's a keloid. It's a keloid. And you should be able to identify keloids from hypertrophic scars. And the main difference between keloid and hypertrophic scar, keloid grows beyond the boundary of the scar, whereas hypertrophic scar remain within the boundary of the scar. Hypertrophic scars settle with time and pressure. Keloids don't settle with time and pressure. The management is intralesional triamcinolone. For keloids, this has also been asked. The management is intralesional triamcinolone. Correct. So these were the images which I wanted to share with you today. Few more points which I want to cover. Please look at images carefully. Again, I'm saying this was part 2. Part 1 is available on YouTube, on the Marrow FMG channel and on my YouTube channel. We can share the link of that video tomorrow when we share the PDF with you. Please, it's a humble request to all FMG students and the NEET aspirants, some of the NEET aspirants who've joined here. Please focus on images, see images every day before your exam. They will really help you, and look at images carefully because they can easily help you diagnose a lot of questions. If you have any doubts or any queries, this is my Instagram ID. My Instagram ID is left-handed surgeon. You can drop me a message here. You can follow this for more surgery updates, for more FMG related questions. If you have any questions regarding your preparation, please ask me and I will share them with you. SMASH surgery, there are two things. One is my workbook, one is the MCQ book for FMG. If you want the MCQ book, you can get it online. There will be a part 3 as well. Thank you. There will be a part 3 as well, which will be held in 2 or 3 weeks' time. This Friday is Dr. Ila's session, where it is part 2 of the pathology session. She will cover systemic pathology this time. So you should attend that session as well. It will be useful for you. Okay, any further questions? You can drop me a message on my Instagram ID, that is left-handed surgeon. I'll be happy to answer your questions there. We will share the PDF tomorrow and we'll post this video on YouTube as well. Thank you for joining in. Stay tuned for the pathology session on Friday and part 3. In between, Dr. Sakshi will also be doing part 2 of her obs and gynae images. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rohan, for the wonderful session. And as sir mentioned, that the PDF of this session will be circulated among the email IDs by tomorrow, and the same recording of this webinar will be uploaded on the Marrow's YouTube channel, FMG playlist. So in case if you have any doubt, you can reach out to us on our support channel, which is support@marrowmed.com. Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Dr. Rohan.
Thank you. Thank you.